And I'm going to hand straight over to Gabe. We can go live whenever our live stream guys are ready.
A little bit.
Fight. Go get him.
War zones. We'll start with war zones. I'm good to start, right? The live stream's going? Yeah? All right. The current state of war zones. War zones are extremely popular. A lot of people are playing them. The medal system, not balanced across classes. Healers, I'm talking to you guys. Concerns about faction imbalance on servers. No ability to queue for specific war zones. Players going AFK and leaving. So we know these are major issues that we're addressing. Well, this is Warzone's part. Open World comes next. In Game Update 1.2, first and foremost, we're having a new Warzone, Navarre Coast. It is going to include a same faction versus same faction gameplay, so as to relieve some of the hotball queues on those mentioned servers. Majority control type objective. So it takes place on De Nova, where conflict's going on there. Majority 3-point objective control. You've got 2 fortifications. They have a shield. You have to have at least 2 out of 3 to be doing damage to the fortification. So of course, that kind of gameplay mechanic allows in a 3-point domination objective map to have major comebacks. So it's been testing really well. We've been having a lot of fun with it, and we look forward to getting you guys in there and getting your feedback from it as well. Ranked PvP. We're introducing that in Game Update 1.2. I've talked about that a little bit on the forums and blog posts. So in Game Update 1.2, we're really excited about bringing this in because we do know kind of a missing component to the overall PvP experience. One of them is a sense of competitive measure. And this is going to be character ratings. It's going to be ELO style for solo and group play. Now, players are going to be able to queue up solo, queue up group, up to 8, and be able to jump in and compete. Wins, losses will adjust their ELO ranking, so their Warzone rating. Now, this is the preseason. We're calling it preseason because it's phase 1, because we do know before we have cross-server queuing, 2,600 on one server is going to mean something different than 2,600 on another server. We do know that. And so this is kind of phase 1 of getting that in there. In Update 1.2, we're also introducing new dailies, and that's going to be based on the majority of completing your dailies are going to be medals as opposed to wins. You like that? Another thing to mention on the medal system, you might have noticed like the objective captured and defended columns, they're not sort of working. Right? That's because we didn't finish off all the medals we wanted to have in there. We wanted to have various different objective medals. We're introducing a lot more medals for objective participation and performance. This includes being the first to get the data core, planting a bomb, things of that nature throughout. Catching a ball, scoring in hot ball. Just going to give you some medals. Oh, there it is. The 18 new medals. Now, obviously, we don't want to get into a situation where you're farming medals, right? Because we don't want people locking at those 5-0s. We do know that is an issue. We're addressing that. The medals rewards are capped. So at a certain cap, we're going to determine what that's going to be because we're essentially doubling the amount of medals that are available. It might be like 8 medals. You get rewards up to 8 medals. But additionally, if you win matches quickly, if you win them fast, you will get a medal for like winning a Warzone in 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. And obviously, if you win it in like 5 minutes, you get all the subsequent medals. So it's going to encourage winning matches fast as opposed to dragging them out. All right, and additionally, the losing team, it encourages them to, continue to participate in objectives because they can still get to that cap. They can still, defend the objectives, try to hold out to the last, and get, more rewards. Now, we're doing kind of a first step of this in 1.1.5, if you've seen those patch notes, because we're capping it at 4. We're not introducing the new medals, but we do have that cap in there. We're increasing the amount of rewards for that per medal, but considering the cap. Additionally, vote to kick. We are working on that system. We do know the concerns about it being an abuse system, so we are working with various different ways to sort of watch that and whether or not a player is actually AFK, because we don't want, obviously, in the leveling up war zones, for example, hey, this dude's level 10, everyone vote him out. So we are dealing with, we're going to be addressing stuff like that. So measures to prevent abuse. So efforts to combat the AFK war zones require minimal player contribution in order to award medals. So again, if someone is just kind of hanging out in the zone and not doing anything, they're not going to get anything. So as you get medals, it's going to, up to a certain threshold, it's going to see your participation, and it's going to be a modifier on your overall rewards in the war zone. So if you have 0 medals, you haven't done anything in the war zone, you haven't participated in any objectives, you're not going to get any rewards. So that we will see in Game Update 1.2 as well. New tier PvP gear, War Hero gear we're introducing. Now, the gear is going to have a greater stat difference. I think Georg mentioned this in the previous panel, that it's going to be a bigger stat difference from PvE gear. We want this so that there's not as much crossover. Now, the overall power difference is still a target of if someone comes into PvE with PvE gear, they're 10% below, and PvP to PvE, 10%. But we don't want to have, from PvP to PvE, we don't want to have you to be able to go in and do those hard mode operations, flashpoints, etc. right away. But we don't want to have the barrier to entry from PvE people going into PvP to be too high. So we're going to have sort of more of a leaning on expertise. There's going to be other sort of stats that are more PvP focused, more of a leaning on that inside the PvP gear. New lightsaber colors with every sort of new tier of gear. We want to introduce some new weapons, and obviously in this game that takes the form of lightsaber colors. New PvP crafting, again mentioned briefly earlier, adding expertise crystals. This is going to help for bridging the kind of barrier to entry. We're also going to be allowing an entry level of PvP gear outfits available to people for credits and things of the like. To bridge that sort of barrier of when you hit level 50, you're in 45 blues, and then having to combat against at least Centurion or Champion. We wanted to bridge that gap. That gap is wider than we intended. Future of war zones. Existing war zones, we also want to introduce same versus same modes on those. So like Void Star, Alderaan, we want to have a training simulation sort of themed variant of those. And then we're going to have the voiceovers and stuff to support that from a story perspective. And help reduce the repeatability of seeing Huttball on some servers. Now we're targeting some of those changes for 1.2, 1.3 timeline. We'll see where they land, and we'll keep you guys apprised of when it's out. Crossover Warzone queuing. Now we've mentioned that this is important for competition. But at the same time, I do want to sort of quell the concerns of, because there's obviously pros and cons with it, we're still going to have incentives and lean towards grouping people of the same server. Now, obviously, as you and it's going to allow for better level bracketing, better matching, more competition on that front. Now, obviously, as you choose more preferences, like I specifically want to queue for this war zone, or I want to do this, do that, you're going to have to reach outside of your server, but we do want to incentivize people on their server playing against each other as well. When it comes to ranked war zones, though, that's going to be more of matching closely to your current ELO rating. So we'll have better competition there. And bracketed tournaments. Another thing we want to introduce with ranked war zones, once we get the cross-server feature in there, is on-demand click and enter tournament. And once four matches are formed, then it starts a bracket system. And you just can do it any time of the day, whenever, and once it matches enough teams, you can just fight each other and get sort of qualification points for first, second, third place within those on-demand tournaments. That's something we want to introduce when we introduce cross-server queuing. And more, like I mentioned, with our preseason, we're we're targeting to be able to allow you to group for a full group of 8 in the ranked war zones. And in the future, we want to formalize that a little bit more with teams. Yes, that is something that we definitely know how important that is, and we want to get that in there, and we are currently working on that. I can't give a target of exactly when that's going to be in there yet, though. Oh, sorry, of course, I got to repeat it because you didn't have a mic. Persisting groups through Warzone, so you don't have to reform every time. That is something we want to add as well, and we'll be doing that in the near future. So you don't have to, get into a war zone, lose your last group, and as you leave a war zone, lose your group coming out. Now, open world PvP. All right, let's talk about that a little bit. The current state of open world PvP, we know that it's significantly less popular than war zones. Level 50 characters playing war zones 3 times more than Ilum PvP. Ilum has some problems. Outlaws Den is seeing some great emergent gaming. It was to be expected as people gear up and they've sort of gotten their highest level PvP progression that they'd want to go toy with it, experiment with different groups and fights, 4v4s, 2v2s, etc. Some of the servers are organizing those things, and that's what that area is for, and we want to continue to support that. So open world PvP in game update 1.2. Going back to the drawing board with Ilum, we had, thank you. So to talk on Ilum for just a brief moment here, we were a bit too ambitious. We didn't get what we wanted accomplished with Ilum. There was some technical difficulties. There was various difficulties that got in the way of what we wanted to accomplish with it. So we're sort of pulling it out. The area is still going to exist there. It's just not going to be incentivized as much. And we're going back to kind of what we wanted to originally do with Ilum and open world PvP. And we'll be talking about that in the future with some of those plans. And I think we can even open it up for discussion after I'm done with the slide here. So we're redesigning it to be more engaging and fun. We do know that just the nature of the beast with open world PvP is that if it's the right time and right place, it's fun. If it's not, it's not. Right? If there's an imbalance or there's not enough people in the area, etc., we want to focus people at certain times with timed objectives, balancing measures between the fighting factions, etc. All that is really important to healthy open world PvP, which were not in there and it did not accompany Ilum on launch, and we're fully aware of that. So removing the Ilum PvP quest, we're introducing the new tier of PvP gear, War Hero. Now, War Hero gear, you're going to be getting from ranked Warzone commendations. Warzone commendations, you're going to be getting Battle Master gear, and the sort of entry-level kind of PvP gear is going to be a champion type level. But it is going to be more focused on expertise, so it's not viable in PvE, like I was saying earlier, but it's entry level into PvP. So as such, the whole bag system and stuff that you've seen that's been we've been deprecating, it'll be fully deprecated in 1.2. Rewards being moved to war zones. The War Hero gear, less randomness from PvP rewards, PvP progression. Again, we had a challenge going in launch with being able to tier because we wanted to mirror PvE and PvP. A big challenge was that in PvE, you have tiers of progression of different content. In PvP, we had sort of a flat tier. We didn't have the tiers. With the ranked war zones, it's introducing an ability for us to be able to tier our PvP content and as such tier our rewards. So we're excited about getting to this point with it in 1.2 at least as it is in preseason. So recapping Ilum redesign. We'll provide more details later this year, but keep posting feedback on the forums. All of that, we're listening to, we're reading, we're paying attention, and that does factor in. Minor changes to Outlaws Den, because like I was saying, the emergent gameplay there, we're excited about that. That's what it's for, but we want an ability for players to get there quicker, faster. Traveling through Mos Eisley, and name escapes me, the other place, obviously when you land in the spaceport, you have quite a travel before you get to the taxi, and then there, we know that we're going to be introducing some quick travel. Right on. And we're leaving it as a PvP sandbox, as I was stating. And there's no pun to that whatsoever on Tatooine. Additional PvP concerns that we're fully aware of and we're addressing, the mirror class imbalances, animation, various things. We're addressing this ongoing. You've seen some stuff in the weekly patches, more so in 1.2. Speed hacking and exploiting, we're doubling up the team size on this, and we are, we're fully aware of it, and we want to get it to a point where it is, relatively under control before we get into our season 1 of Ranked Warzones. Again, another reason this is sort of a pre-season. And discussion topics. So what do you think about Warzone rankings? Any questions on that front? What are your thoughts on Navarre Coast, the majority 3-point domination, and design considerations being made for the Ilum redesign? I touched on a couple of them, but by all means, we can discuss that more. And not limited to these topics, but go for it.
Okay, I know that there's going to be tons of questions about this. I'm going to try and get through as many as possible, so just a reminder to keep your questions brief, okay? So we can get back on track. So, Chris, choose your question.
Yes, so we're talking about being able to create the 8-man teams. Are there going to be any PvP, not necessarily rankings, but in the normal war zones now, where it's just pickup groups only and you don't have to worry about being steamrolled, more or less, by a pre-made team?
So with the matchmaking system in the normal war zones, as it exists right now, it actually does make an effort to match group versus group. Obviously, it is dependent on population and who's queued up, and over time, it sort of loosens some of those restrictions. Naturally, when we get the cross-server queuing in there, that will make it all the more prevalent that it is more group versus group and solo versus solo. Oftentimes, what it initially tries to do, and just to give a little bit more details, is have one group on each side and then the rest solo filled out. And then after time, obviously, it alleviates it, and then you end up having 2 groups versus 1 group, et cetera, which obviously is an issue, and cross-server queuing can help that in the future as well.
Hey, Gabe. Falconer here from Condemned. First question is just for Georg, actually. With the changes to PvP gear coming, will you also be changing the diminishing returns on expertise in order to have that go up a bit more?
All the stat caps have been rebalanced following the introduction of the tiers, so yes.
And then just for Gabe, as far as Ilum performance issues go, can you just kind of level with us about what's going on there, and if it's like underlying problems within the hero engine that is causing that, or what you're planning on doing there?
It's actually, there's a few things. The major thing was well, first off, so we did testing internally and a lot of these issues, and I touched on this on an interview or a forum post or something in the past. But sometimes when you go live with the game, some of the issues don't really show until you're live with the engine, and that's why we're going to have longer soak times on PTS and of the like with this feature and other features. So some of the stuff that we have found, it was optimization and just basically node creations and destructions with some of the ambience in the area, including the turrets and the walkers and of the like. So that's another reason sort of we're pulling back from it as we're doing optimization on those elements.
I might get booed for this because I've never been to Ilum, don't have a 50, but in representing my guild, I will say that they were devastated by what I understand, the removal of battling over objectives because there was trading going on. Not on our server, at least where my guild was playing, and the new, more deathmatch-based system just wasn't the same. So will there be a return to battling over objectives in open world PvP?
So first little background on what went down there. In the beta, what we were aiming towards, and it was sort of the plan B in Ilum, was to have the 5 objectives lock and be locked for a time, and then eventually become, unsecured, and so people can come and capture them. what we found leading up to the last betas is that we were unable to address the issue that was causing them to be permanently locked. Some of you guys, I'm sure, were involved in the beta and saw some of that. So we had to kind of step back from our initial plans with Ilum. And as a result, we weren't able to do much, we weren't able to change much when we went live. So as a result, trading was happening, and we knew that was going to happen. We weren't able to react in time to address that. And we still haven't sort of dealt with or solved that underlying issue with those things being locked. So we had to change it to kills for the meantime. It is not by any stretch of the imagination, our long-term goals with it. And you're asking about our future plans going back to objectives. Can't touch on too many of the details on what we plan to do on Ilum in the future, but it will be objective focused.
When we were preforming guilds before the game was actually released, we were allowed to have allies and adversaries. Do you, at any point in the future, see some kind of in-game functionality that will actually allow us to utilize the adversary system that we did create before we were loaded? And at the same point, do you also see anything such as bounties being offered for players across the game?
So I'll touch on the bounty system thing. That is, I mean, I and the PvP team would love to have a bounty type system. It is something that we've been discussing, and we can't give any definitive timeline on it, but it is something that we would desire to see in the game as well. As far as the guild adversary stuff, I can let Damien chat about that.
Wall of crazy. At any
There
point
you
in the
go.
future is a long time. We'll talk. We can talk more about that once we get to the guild stuff. But there is a roadmap. It's on there. It's not near, but it's there.
So we are going to be getting the opportunity to create full 8-mans. Will we have a chance to like throw down the gauntlet to other guilds or other groups like, hey, you bring your 8 best, we'll bring our 8 best, and we'll just pick a war zone and go at it?
That'd be cool, right? Yes, that is something that we do have. We have a design for, and it is something we want to implement. And it's not, unfortunately, didn't make it in for Game Update 1.2, but Warzone Challenges is what we've called them. Yeah, lay down the gauntlet. So yeah, it's something we definitely want to do.
Right now we have a few guild members that are Battle Master, which are as level 50 or higher ranked on PvP. How are you going to address the accommodation issue where right now all they do is farm daily and weekly quests for accommodations to acquire gear? Are you going to make it easier and less grindy to acquire higher level PvP gear?
So with Game Update 1.2, and we're adjusting some of it in 1.15, but with Game Update 1.2, the quests are not going to be, it's not going to be, because right now, sorry, let me take a step back. Right now, for those who don't know, if you're at Valor Rank 60 and you're trying to get your Battle Master gear, the only way to do it is with the quests and get the bags. What that results in, obviously, is some bad behavior of leaving war zones because you just want to get those wins if you see that you're losing. Fully aware of that. Part of the issue with that is that we weren't able to, it sort of took away the incentive to get commendations and incentive to perform inside of war zones. In Game Update 1.2, it's ranked Warzone commendations directly that will directly purchase War Hero gear. It is not locked to a rank. It's not locked to a rating. It is direct. It's direct purchase. It's not locked to a Valor rank, your Warzone rating, anything like that. Now, Warzone rating will allow you to get a different colored version of that gear. So it'll be a prestige thing. So the rating, especially in preseason, is going to be sort of just a prestige type thing. Different color gear, mounts, of things of that sort. But it'll be direct purchase. If you participate and you perform well in ranked war zones, you'll get a lot of ranked Warzone accommodations that you can then buy War Hero gear with. And sorry, one other thing to touch on, the Valor rank requirement for Battle Master gear was sort of a temporary measure. If you followed some of the early interviews and discussions about it, Valor Rank is supposed to be focused on kind of a PvP prestige thing, because it's very much a measure of how much you've participated in PvP, not necessarily a content or difficulty or skill level gear reward type element. It is a participation thing and have prestige type things, which includes like being able to be the leader in a war zone, mounts, colored things, banners perhaps, other things like that we're exploring with Valor Rank. But that's the focus of it, not a specific progression, power progression.
Romfu here. I'm currently run 24 versus 24 man fights out in Outlaw's Den against our rival guild. We have a lot of fun, a lot of strategy goes involved in these fights.
Cool.
But what I'm wondering here is, how am I supposed to maintain my large PvP guild when you're only giving us 8-man content?
It's not that we don't want to give larger, because larger war zones are in the works. That is something that we want to do, like large war zone battles. It is just what we have right now. We've got the 8-man war zones. Now, we do think as far as matched PvP goes, having too large or too small has different problems on both sides of the coin as far as competitive goes. When you have like 8 and it's like a soccer team or a basketball team, it's enough where everyone has a part to play and you can coordinate, and it has to do with the objectives. We're excited about that. But at the same time, we do enjoy allowing players to get together and have, massive battles, which was the original intention of getting Ilum in there as well as Outlaw's Den, though it was never slated to have them become a robust RVR system, at least at launcher right now. We want to have the forum or the areas for you guys to be able to do that. So in short, we're aware we have the areas like Outlaw's Den where you can do that stuff now, and we do want to have more content for larger PvP battles in the future.
Yeah, so I guess we can assume that the current Valor system is going to be sort of going away with the ranked war zones and becoming more of like a just completely cosmetic or title-based thing from what it currently is. I guess I'm just asking for a clarification on that. But my real question is, what are we going to be doing in terms of like guild versus guild PvP?
Again, the guild versus guild PvP, sort of following up on his question there, the grouping up for ranked war zones up to 8 people, but beyond that, we do want to do larger type of matched PvP matches in the future. In addition, we can talk about the Ilum redesign stuff as well, just open world generally speaking. As far as the Valor rank thing, again, the Valor, all the focus is prestige, the focus is sort of your veterancy, if you will, like how much of a PvP veteran you are and a recognition for that, as opposed to specific gear progression or content progression within PvP.
Hi, I'm Whiff from Nerf Dialogue. My main question is about targeting in PvP. At times I feel like I'm playing more of a first-person shooter than an MMO and I'm trying to get a target. You can't tap target out of LOS, no nameplates to click on and anything. Are there going to be any sort of updates with that?
Yeah, the tab targeting improvements are in the works. We do know that there's various aspects to the tab targeting that we want to do, smarter tab targeting, etc. Nameplates, I'm sorry, what was the nameplates question? Was
Game Will Not Be Named, I guess, has clickable nameplates above the characters, so you don't have the discrepancies in targeting characters that have small models,
sure,
like
yeah.
females.
Yeah, we do, those are all improvements we want to do. Not all of them are in 1.2. We do want to have larger boxes to click on, better tab targeting, labels on the nameplates as well, like a class, base class label, things of that nature, just to make it ease of access in combat and PvP.
So, as an RPer, and I don't PvP as much, but I do enjoy it. One of the things that I like least about it, the least cinematic thing about PvP is watching people run around in circles. It's horrible. And with the latency, having somebody running through or behind you, trying to get behind them, at any point are we going to move away from that?
Are we going to move away from latency?
Well, no, specifically.
What's the plan, Gabe? What's our latency
No,
plan?
sorry, not
I'm working
latency
on that internet.
specifically, but more talking to being able to face the target that you're on, so that people don't use running around in tight circles as a tactic.
I see where you're getting at. Auto-facing in PvP. So, there's definitely two camps on that one in there. I mean, I don't know how else to phrase it. I'm not necessarily, like, auto-facing, I feel, like when you have combat and you have positionals and you have things of that nature, auto-facing diminishes it in a lot of ways. I know that it certainly looks better, which is why it's one of the things that I think is very awesome that we have it in PvE with the choreographed combat and just seeing it there. In PvP, I mean, we're continuing to do animation, polish updates, movement prediction, polish and enhancements. I mean, so you'll see those things continue to roll out there and get better. I mean, as you can see, if you've been playing from launch to now, you can see the improvements on that front. So that's all I can say on that, is that we're going to continue to improve that, but the auto-facing in PvP, not likely.
We actually had both systems in beta, and we settled on the no auto-facing in PvP. You can play a smuggler or agent, though. They get auto-facing while they're in cover.
In general, if you take away, if you put in auto-facing, then PvP just becomes who has a better command over their rotation, right? And at the end of the day, that's hopefully you want PvP to have a little more dimension than that. So.
Okay, we are going to take a couple of questions from the live stream right now, and I know that you guys have tons of questions, so we're going to come back to you guys.
We'll be hanging out later.
And yeah,
we'll have
Gabe
some
is,
drinks. You guys
Gabe is
can
going to
ask
be
me some
here.
more.
He's not going to be allowed to leave the building. So I'm just going to pass over to Eric here, who has a few questions from our live stream.
And if it makes you guys feel better, we just crossed 18,000 people watching, so they have a lot of questions too, luckily.
Hey.
All right, our first question comes from Canut. Will obtaining a set of best-in-slot PvP gear after 1.2 be achievable only by PvPing, or will you also need to craft it and/or PvE?
It's going to be the ranked war zones. The war hero gear is going to be the best gear. We are introducing some craftable expertise items, but the best in slot is going to be from ranked war zones.
I have to qualify a bit. So since you are now able to extract every mod from your item, and B, crafters are now able to crit craft orange appearances, which is the custom gear with an additional augment slot, there's definitely an upgrade path for you to take what you've gotten from the war hero gear or from the operation that you're running and slot it into your custom appearance. There's also the ability to get that custom appearance crafted orange, so you don't have to step away from having that awesome new tier of gear and not having the augment slot available. But to answer the question shortly, yes, there's a path to even better gear, and that involves buying it from a crafter. Or building it yourself, of course, yes.
All right, this is a good question for anybody who's a tank and likes to PvP. It comes from Slim X. Right now, defense and shield or absorb is strong in PvE content, but nearly useless in PvP. Are there any plans to make those tank stats more useful in PvP? If not, will those stats be removed from PvP gear to make room for more damage?
Oh boy.
A little bit of both. Georg, if you want to touch on that.
So there's an interesting perception, and that is if you basically give up your defense and you take more damage, offense, really good defense in some cases, that is really good. That's actually not entirely true, because what you're doing is, as a tank, you are vulnerable against tech and force attacks, so as certain types of sorcerers will tear you to shreds. If you give up if you give up on your defense gear, you're making yourself also vulnerable to the highest damaging classes in the game, which would be the Sentinel or the Sniper. Especially if these guys stack accuracy on their end, which is another one of these unappreciated stats, you're going to be now vulnerable to two classes, and then only healers are left, and you're not going to be able to beat them. So this is kind of a circular situation where people have foregone accuracy gear, which means you can start foregoing defense gear as a tank. And still get away with it. When we get into the ranked area and people actually play more aggressively, you're not going to get away with that. That said, there is a bit of an under-the-hood rebalance of all stats going into 1.2, so any kind of theory crafting and assumption will have to be redone anyway.
Neener.
Hey, we're giving you a log to help with that, so it shouldn't be as hard this time around.
All right. Our next question comes from Dietops. And the question is, there isn't much to do in PvP once you're done with the daily. Are there plans to add more diverse types of PvP daily quests?
So, like I was talking about in 1.2, you will, like, it's not your end game progression, your Valor Rank 60 Battlemaster gear is rate limited by that daily. That rate limit is not going to be there because you can continue to earn those ranked Warzone accommodations. So yeah, sort of. I mean, it's the sort of focus on daily is going away. It'll still be there. You'll get a couple ranked Warzone accommodations from it.
Okay, we're going to take one more question from the room. Eric has got a microphone. He's going to run and find somebody. 18,000 people online. You know, make it a good one.
So you guys touched briefly this morning on dynamic events. Are they going to be focused toward dynamic PvE events or dynamic PvP events? Because we'd like to see some more open world and kind of spontaneous PvP as opposed to just, running around on Ilum.
You got that, James?
Yeah, so the thing about the dynamic events, and as I was alluding to, is we don't really want to give away what we're doing with them. We have a full team devoted to it. We're adding tech to give them a lot of ability to come up with unique ideas. So I can't really tell you what you're going to be seeing because it's going to be a surprise. But we want it to be definitely all kinds of different things. We don't want them to become, business as usual. We don't want you to be able to predict them. So you could see something like you're suggesting at some point in the future.
Hey, Gabe.
And
since sort of alluding to this, and I was surprised it didn't come up in here, do you want to talk a bit about just wandering around the world murdering people?
It's fun, but needs more incentives.
But are we going to get rewards for it?
Yeah, one of the things that unfortunately we did not get in for launch, but we do want to get in is a drop list when you kill players out in the world, be it mercenary accommodations, Valor, or some other loot from them. That is something that we very much want to do, and we are going to be doing it.
That sounds like a nice way to wrap up PvP with a note about randomly murdering people. So thank you very much to Gabe Amatangelos, Fresh on the Plane.
Now everyone knows your